Hello and welcome back to another episode of the School Committee Update. I'm your host, Anthony Martinez, and joining us today is Mr. Leiran Biton. Great to meet you. We are so happy for your time today. It's an honor for you to just come in and share some of your story. I think a lot of us want to learn more about you. Why don't we start with first, how's your day going? How have you been so far?
Thank you. Yeah, great. I've been on school committee for just over a month now. But I've been involved in our schools for a long time, so really excited to be starting my work. But my day's going great.
Perfect. We really want to unpack your journey and even your background leading up to your work today.
Cool.
Let's just start with the school committee. Talk to us about why you ran. What were your decision-making items to now join the committee today?
Awesome. So, you know, I joined school committee this year after serving as president of the Somerville Council of PTAs, which is sort of an umbrella organization of the different parent-teacher organizations across the city. I did that for 2 years. That was building on my work at the West Somerville Neighborhood School PTA, where I was an officer for 7 years. So really, you know, I learned so much from my fellow parents. We had, you know, PTA is an advocacy organization at its heart. We're advocating for the best schools, the best education for our kids, both, and it's a partnership between teachers and parents as evidenced by the name. So, you know, what I really wanted to do on school committee was elevate the voices of my fellow community members, my parents, teachers, and sort of bring that perspective to school committee. And so that's what I'm hoping to do.
And in doing that, you're probably learning all kinds of things, right? Now being inside of the committee.
Yeah, so learning a ton about the process. We're heading into budget season. I've never been through this before, so I'm going to be leaning on my colleagues from across the city and the district leadership to sort of give me the information that I'll need to help make the right decisions. But yeah, I have been paying a lot of attention over recent years to school committee. And so I was trying to be ready. I'm a preparer. I like to be ready for things. I don't jump into something until I feel, you know, 90% ready. Right. So that's kind of the way I did this too. So I have a lot to learn for sure, but I've been studying.
And while you're studying, do you see any challenges you're excited to face or that are already in front of you in terms of the work you want to accomplish?
Challenges, for sure. So I got into this race, you know, I announced that I was going to be running for school committee, and then we had a structural failure at one of our schools. The Winter Hill School had a piece of concrete fall in a stairwell. Fortunately, no one was injured. It happened over a weekend. Right. But that completely changed the challenges that our district faced. We knew that addressing the physical school building space was going to be a huge challenge over some period of time, but that accelerated things. The city and the district went into high gear. They moved the students to a safe learning environment. But now, you know, the priority on day one was different than I thought it would be when I started running. So, you know, that's the biggest challenge I think that we face in our school.
That's
today.
What's on the table currently.
I mean, we have to serve the families in who are, you know, currently trekking across the city every morning and every, you know, evening and afternoon to get their kids to and from school safely, making sure that they have the right resources, and that we're treating them. Nobody wanted this situation, so that's definitely the number one challenge.
Yeah, and you're facing it head front, it sounds like, in the work that you're
doing.
We
have to. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm just one of, 7 school committee members. So, you know, it's a team approach, and the district and the city all have to work together.
Yeah. And honestly, I think this is just a great way to not so much to start, but to really kind of just dive in and test the fires and see how you're doing. And it seems like you have the perfect attitude to be approaching this. And that's what we hope to look for in a school committee.
That's so kind of you to say. I really just want to, like I said, I want to support the people that I ran for this position so I could help support my fellow parents and support the kids. So we need to make sure that they don't lose education time, that they get a high quality education. So that's our challenge.
I was just going to dive maybe into some of the talking points, some of the issues you're excited to challenge and face. But you just mentioned the word kids, and I think it's a nice point to pause and stop here. You're a parent yourself. Can you talk about the relationship you have, not only as a father, but maybe with the mindset you now bring into a school committee?
Thank you. So, sorry, the question is around how my being a parent
being
affects,
a parent,
So you obviously don't need to be a parent to be an effective school committee member. There have been school committee members in the past who have served, well without being parents. But it does give you a unique insight into the schools. Challenges that I've faced with my family mirror those that other families in the district that I've spoken to have confronted. And those include, trying to navigate the special education process. I know a lot of families have had trouble accessing special education, and that is a real process, and that's one that I really would like to spend some time on during my time on school committee, trying to figure out how we can better give parents and teachers the tools that they need to target special education resources at the kids who really need it. So sometimes we sort of make the process a little harder than it needs to be to get a kid identified as needing services. And I would love to help break down some of those barriers. Obviously, there's a lot of legal constraints around that. But I think another aspect of being a parent through this is approaching problems with a lens of compassion, right? We're all trying to do the best that we can for the kids, right? And every teacher who walks into a school building every day, that's like one of the hardest jobs in the world, has the same goals as the parents who are sending their kids to school, right? They want what's best for the kids. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they have different priorities around it, but or a different way of achieving those goals. But we're all ultimately on the same team, and approaching one another with compassion and assuming best intentions. This is all really important to achieve the best results for the kids. And I think being a parent has helped me get there, to want to work together, to work in partnership, because ultimately, again, we all have the same goal.
And how did your family react? I think when you shared the news, this is what you wanted to do, and you're doing it.
To join school committee?
Yeah.
So I think my wife's first reaction was to roll her eyes. She said, I thought maybe this day was coming, because I had been involved in PTA for a long time, organizing citywide meetings and talking schools every night with my colleagues across the city. I think my parents both said, why? My father's reaction was the funniest, because he said, why not mayor? Yeah, so I'm glad that I have his full-throated support and confidence. But no, schools are where my heart is. And my kids have been very supportive too, which I'm grateful for.
And I'm trying to think of how those conversations went as well. Did you kind of like break them in, like, okay, I'm going to be on the school committee, this is what Dad's going to be doing now? Or were they just like, yeah, you do you, Dad?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. My kids, So they're a little older. My kids are now, my daughter's at the high school and my son is in 6th grade. So
they've got a lot going on.
They've got a lot going on. They are definitely not in awe of their father. Like kids, I'm going to a meeting tonight. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a lot of
business as usual.
Maybe if an issue comes up that they have an opinion about, I'll ask them about what they think. They often they don't have a lot of thoughts on the matters that are policy matters or things like that. They want to know, I don't know. Well, they have very, very specific concerns that are age appropriate.
Right. I mean, this might be a great chance to sort of dive a little bit more into the issues themselves.
Sure.
Things you'd like to unpack for us. One of the things you've mentioned is being excited to improve the way we teach students in inclusive classrooms. Let's talk about the word inclusive, what that looks like to you.
Yep.
And improving how that education reaches them. Can you break that down for us?
Thank you. So in this context, inclusive really applies to special education and I think the word is standard education. I'm not, or mainstream education. So in an inclusive classroom, you have kids who have special education needs and kids who are sort of more in the mainstream classroom don't have special education needs. And to ensure that the teacher is better able to provide a suitable education for both sets of students, right? Because we want the kids who have greater needs to be able to access the same curriculum, maybe with some additional supports, but without taking them out of the classroom and giving them a separate education. That's not seen as equitable. That's why we really strive for inclusive classrooms. So I think that's important. But what I hear from teachers and what I hear from families is that our kids sometimes need a greater level of support. That may mean more push-in services, so reading specialists, additional special education services, speech pathology services, occupational, occupational services, I think is what it's called. Basically just additional services that from knowledgeable providers who can help provide the supports that the kids need to be successful in a mainstream classroom. And those teachers, I'm thinking about some of the special ed teachers who, float around the classrooms and they may be helping one specific kid. That kid might not know that special education teacher is really focused on them because they're spreading out their services to the whole class. They are helping that one kid, but it really helps lift everybody. So our paraprofessionals, our special ed professionals, and other educators can work in partnership in almost a co-teaching model with the classroom teacher. So I've named a lot of different professionals. It costs a lot of money to get all of those additional teachers into the classrooms. And, we have to be creative. We have to find ways to fund those. So as we're entering budget season, we'll be talking about what positions we want to have and fund. And those are hard conversations. I'm not looking forward to those conversations, but I see them as opportunities to target additional services to kids who need them. So, and I want to be able to provide it so that the school can't say, no, we can't. Our people are too strapped. Like, I want our whole city to really be united around providing our kids with the best education possible.
And with those services in place, what happens with the funding that you need, with the instruments needed to sort of be that resource for kids? What is that vision you guys see as a school committee now inside of a classroom?
Yeah. So I can't speak for the full school committee, right? I'm just speaking for myself.
Sure.
I see it as addressing some of the learning loss that we've seen during COVID. That clearly is one of the biggest challenges coming out of the last couple of years. Somerville was closed longer than almost any other district in the state. And, you know, I know the decisions that led to that were really difficult, but a lot of the kids are struggling now as a result of decisions that we made without full information a couple years ago. And also just dealing with the building challenges that we've had. So I think pushing in as much service as we can really help provide the support that our kids need to overcome the learning loss that they had in the past and to help them reach for greater heights. I mean, I know I'm using like cliched language there, but every kid has a unique potential, right? And kids are brilliant. And what we need to do is unlock that for every kid. Find what it is that sparks them. And the more opportunities that kids have to learn from a trusted adult, and it might not be the same adult for each kid, right? So we each have the certain person in our lives who made an impact for us. We don't know who that's going to be. At the high school, it might be the theater teacher for a kid. It might be a coach. It might be their physics teacher. Like, we need to find the spark for each kid. And I'm super excited about the opportunity to expand that universe if we can, to help teachers give those extra little bits that they can to each kid in their classroom.
Yeah, to equip them as best as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we could keep diving into issues. I think this is a nice point to maybe dig a little deeper here and ask. We all went through school. We were all at that same age. Our systems may have looked different then. Are there challenges you're seeing now, if you could imagine being a student in Somerville, are there challenges you can see now that you couldn't have imagined as a kid, as you were growing up? Are there challenges you see them facing that's like it's a different ball game? And if so, could you talk about that? I'd like this to be a moment to kind of like understand the mentality of children maybe in the Somerville school system.
Yeah. So that's an area that I think being a parent informs. As a parent of kids today, you have to deal with connectedness, phones, social media, screens. Screens are in the class. They are part of the classroom. Students learn from a smart board that's at the front of the class. They play videos as a standard part of everyday learning. And that's not a knock on that. And meanwhile, kids have, let's face it, they've got their phones in their pockets or their backpacks. There's distractions. And when they leave school, they're still connected to their friends in ways that I wasn't when I was growing up, right? I had solitude, I had boredom, and I knew how to contend with those things, especially as an only child. So that is a unique aspect of raising kids today and of teaching kids today. We don't have a standard set of policies across the district for how to address phones. I think a lot of our principals are on the same page around that, but each school has its own policy. And parents see this differently, right? Some parents want their kids fully connected all the time. Some parents won't buy their kids a phone, but regardless of the approach of the parents or of a teacher in any given classroom, that technology has changed rapidly over the last, 10, 15 years, and it's only going to continue to progress in ways that we can't predict. And how that will impact our kids' education is something we as the school committee need to not only be aware of, but I think we'll need to raise our voices about it at some point, to either set a policy or at least respond to the concerns that we're hearing from families and the administration and help support that.
It sounds like you're saying there's an anticipation of how technology could affect learning models and how to keep up or provide the parameters for these models to still be successful.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because again, you can't cut it off.
Yeah.
It's the Pandora's box is open. So yeah, we have to adjust our teaching models to account for the reality in front of us. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you for taking that on and just kind of sticking with me there on that question. We do want to go back to some of the issues that you're passionate about. So I want to give you the chance to talk about out-of-school time, after-school care programs,
Yep.
How to connect them with better resources. I'd love to start that conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things I hear, so I represent families on the west side of the city in Ward 7. One of the things I hear from a lot of families on that side of the city is about how to receive after-school care. The city provides a lot of different after-school options. A lot of them are on the eastern side of the city, and they're great options for kids across the city. And we, as a city, we're dense. We're really focused on equity, so it's important that we are directing services where they're needed most. At the same time, it's really challenging for people on the west side of Davis Square to get anywhere east at 2:30. So, thinking about how we can expand options for after-school care, and also to provide age-appropriate after-school activities for kids at all age spectrums is something that's really important to me. One thing I've heard from families and teachers is that as your kids age out of after school, usually like 5th grade, 6th grade, there isn't anything for them to do anymore.
Right.
And we have this model of K through 8 schools in Somerville, which is great because each teacher knows every kid from kindergarten through 8th grade, right? They don't get away with anything. Teachers know how to handle each of those kids and how to provide services in a way that's meaningful to the kids. I love that. At the same time, I'm hearing, especially from our middle grades cohorts, the parents of those students, so 6th, 7th, 8th grade, that they're starving for more to do that's age appropriate because they don't have after school anymore. And the teachers and the students they're not well matched anymore with things that are available to them. So I've heard this idea of a middle school. We don't have a standalone middle school. We don't have one. And I think if we did have a sort of critical mass of students and teachers who were focused on that particular age group, options for after-school activities, extracurriculars that are really targeted on that unique age range, that would be a game changer.
And do your children as well, do they actually occupy after-school programs or are familiar with that kind of time after school?
So my youngest, actually both my kids went to after school. My youngest doesn't, he just aged out. So he's doing an after-school D&D program now. Really good.
Right.
But that's just, once a week. So we've kind of cobbled together a couple things to keep him entertained and learning. He does some chess stuff. My daughter there's a ton of opportunities at the high school now, so she's into theater, and I love the different options that are available. But yeah, there is a little bit of an activities desert. There's some sports, but again, you got to find the spark for each kid.
And so you yourself as a parent also got to see in real time as they're aging out themselves. It's like, oh, okay, well, what is next for them, or how do we occupy that time? You got to see that firsthand.
Yeah, and my friend kids, I experienced this not in a silo myself, right? Like been hearing from all sorts of people about that need.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, thank you for touching on that and kind of unpacking that for us. It sounds to me like a lot of the issues you're raising, you're coming at it. You've seen that perspective either personally, you've shared it with other people, and you're just trying to see what solutions you can bring out. It almost sounds like you have a scientific mind for kind of tackling things, and that is a leading question. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your journey here? You're not just coming into this with this sort of just school passion. It seems like you've done a lot in your career. Can you talk us through what came before this?
Sure, thank you. I do try to approach problems with the basis of evidence to try to make decisions. And that's because I am trained as a scientist. I am a scientist at the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Currently, I manage a team of folks at our regional laboratory up in Chelmsford. But, you know, the focus of my career has been mostly on air quality. And that's because I have a very personal connection to air quality. I grew up with asthma. And so not being able to breathe really makes you interested in the air quality. You know,
we're glad you can breathe.
Thank you. I'm really glad too. It's amazing what you notice when you can't, what your triggers are. So, you know, I'd walk into a house with cats, and that for me was a huge trigger. But there were days that you know, in the summer when I suddenly just couldn't breathe and I really couldn't figure it out. And it was only after really learning about air quality that it was probably summer ozone, smog, that caused me to go to the hospital a couple times when I was in college. And, you know, it's only been in recent years that I've had a really solid grasp on my own asthma. But as an air quality professional, I am really glad to be able to give back and focus on the health of members of my own community, kids, right? Kids are really susceptible to air quality. Asthma rates in children have gone up year after year. And providing safe, clean air for people to breathe is my life's work, and I am blessed to be able to work with really talented and dedicated people who make that happen every day.
That's very well said, and I don't think we could speak any further of how fortunate the committee must be to have you, the experience you bring to them, and almost the attitude you have. It seems like you're really there to be a subject of change. So, Mr. Leiran, we really thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Tony.
And this conversation. This was another special episode of the School Committee Update. I'm your host, Anthony Martinez, joined today with Mr. Leiran Biton. Thank you very much for joining us, and we certainly look forward to all the changes you'll be bringing.
Thank you.